Hey, before I start this, I just want to thank you all for the overwhelming amounts of support for my last video. I don't want to dwell on this too much, as I know you've probably heard it a million times from a bunch of other creators, but I have been trying my hand at YouTube for a very long time now. Like, I want to say maybe a full decade at this point, and not once would I ever imagine myself sitting here and just saying that I've reached half 1,000 subscribers. I'm still having a rather hard time getting used to the fact that just 2 months ago I was sitting at 69 subs. Don't fucking laugh at that. But seeing where I'm at now provides me with so much more motivation to just keep doing what I do and just get better at it. Because if I was still sitting at 20 subs right now with the amount of effort I tried to put into each video, I think I would have just thrown in the towel and called it quits. With that being said, however, I am a little nervous seeing that almost all of you came in for my metal video. Now don't worry, there will be more metal, but in the meantime, for those unaware, let me introduce you to the regular content I post on my channel. I'm a game reviewer. Specifically, I review indie games or old school first-person shooters. I know that might resonate well with some of you older folks, who might have some fond memories of playing Doom or Duke Nukem back in the 90s with your fat, beefy desktops, blasting the heads off of some demons. These are the types of games I mostly talk about here. There obviously will be some small deviations from that, whether I talk about something a little newer or different, but one thing will always remain the same, and that is my love for games. Except for the ones that aren't so good. Welcome to my second annual Doomtober Marathon, a little something I started up last year where I review nothing but spooky games that are perfect for this time of year. Look, I love satanic themes and imagery. I'm not a Satanist, I swear, but I love how unapologetically appalling it is to some. Seeing people giving me dirty looks, covering their children's eyes when I'm proudly walking around with my Rotting Christ t-shirt that has Lucifer smack dab in the middle of it. But for the time of spooks and screams, it's a little too on the nose. And I don't really want to start the second year of the marathon off like that, especially since the last 3 Doomtober games that I covered were almost just about that. I have noticed there is a surprising lack of games centered around Lovecraftian mythos. This is a statement made by someone who doesn't really pay a whole lot of attention to these games, but one can't deny that games with this theme rarely ever break into the mainstream. One of these games is a retro shooter known as Forgive Me Father, released April of this year and developed by Byte Barrel, a Polish indie studio that has a whopping total of 2 games under their belt, none of which are anywhere close to a retro shooter. I honestly can't really seem to recall how I managed to stumble upon Forgive Me Father, but if I had to take a wild guess, it probably just randomly appeared on Steam's front page for me. Right off the bat, its comic book art style was already enough to pique my interest, coupled with the Lovecraftian themes, something that I'm very unfamiliar with, but because of that, it only further fueled my curiosity. And I've noticed that some of the trailers were not only voiced by Cookie Monster,
I am the new beginning,
but they showed off character abilities. Alright, a retro shooter that seems to have some light RPG elements, I'm down for that. Upon starting a new game, you're prompted with a character selection screen of all things. You get the option of choosing the priest, who apparently has a much slower but more defensive playstyle, or the journalist, who's a little more aggressive. What they mean by that is both characters have their own skill kits that are tuned to fit their description. For now, I'm sticking with the journalist because, you know, being fast and aggressive is a lot of what boomer shooters are built on. One of the very first things I've picked up on with FMF were its controls. I've heard a lot of people say it feels weightless, but I honestly feel like it's the exact opposite. This game has really grounded controls, which can be a good thing for some. I personally prefer more weightless controls, but I don't mind the occasional as close as you can get to realistic with these kinds of games type feel. However, FMF is like overly grounded, to an almost ridiculous degree. I did get the hang of it sometime around the 2nd chapter on my first playthrough, but when I came back to play this for footage, I found myself trying to get readjusted to them again. By far the worst thing about it all is the jumping. The game might as well not even have it because of how pathetic it feels. Best way I could describe it is if your character had a cinder block tied around their ankles at all times, and it becomes a bit of a problem later, but we'll get to that. Going back to the journalist's skill kit, however, what exactly makes your kit so aggressive is that it requires you to be in the enemy's face, or it actively encourages you to do that. I can tell there's been a lot of thought and consideration put into it. Like her pack of cigarettes, which slows down time, or one of her other abilities has her rolling up a doobie, smoking it, and whoa dude, you get like a magical ganja sword. When using the ganja sword, every time you damage an enemy, you regain health, so I guess it's pretty neat. Then you have her 2 other abilities, her camera, which freezes enemies, and the voodoo doll, which creates an explosion around you, damaging any nearby foes. All of these abilities are powered by this square you see right here. This is your madness meter. Truth be told, I don't exactly know what it does because for a mechanic that has such a large presence throughout the entire game, it's only very briefly explained during the tutorial. But from my own observations, I can tell you that I think it's supposed to kind of function like a mana bar. You can't activate any of your abilities without a certain amount of madness. You increase your madness by simply slaying enemies or by downing 40s just laying on the ground. If your madness gets high enough, your screen will turn completely black and white and you get a damage increase and you take less damage from enemies. It's a pretty neat effect, but a glaring issue with it is that it can obviously sometimes obscure your vision, making it very hard to sometimes just navigate through the level environment. If it doesn't seem like your cup of tea, there's an option to turn the visual effect off. There is also the leveling system. Yep, a leveling system complete with a rather large skill tree with ability upgrades and even weapon upgrades. Honestly, it's not as good as you think it is. Yes, it's a pretty unique system in a retro FPS, and yes, it does actually feel a little rewarding at times, but sometimes you end up wasting a hard-earned skill point by buying a weapon upgrade that somehow ends up being worse than the base weapon. Like for example, you can turn the Tommy gun into a damn laser gun, which you can't ever go wrong with, but as it turns out, the Tommy gun's vanilla-ass upgrade, which just increases its fire rate, is somehow 100 times better than it. In fact, I'd go as far as to say this is probably the only best weapon in the game. I shit you not, when I feel like a fight is dragging out for a tad bit too long, I just pull this sucker out and it melts through mostly everything like butter. And that is one of the biggest issues I have with this game. Not just the gunplay, but Fmf'S combat is atrocious for an FPS. Enemies hardly ever give any noticeable visual feedback when you hit them with anything apart from the health bar just getting chipped away, which removes so much of the power and satisfaction that these weapons should yield. This is one of the most important things in not just a retro shooter, but just any FPS in general, is having weapons that feel good to use because, well, you're going to be running around with these 99.9% of the time you're playing, and if they don't feel good, then can you really say you're playing much of a shooter? There's also weapon damage being really inconsistent for whatever reason. Point blank shotgun should instantly kill pretty much any basic enemy. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about that. Yet in Fmf, it seems like that's entirely up to a coin toss. Sometimes they'll die instantly, sometimes they'll have a goddamn pubic hair of health left. It's so small you can't even see the neon red glow of their health bar. This game also loves using bullet sponge enemies, especially towards the last few chapters. I don't even think it's really necessary for me to get into why this is bad. Fights become less of me thinking about what weapon I want to use and more of just pulling whatever still has ammo in it and just pump blood into the enemies till I see them drop. It's fucking boring. I'm not excited, I'm not joyful, I'm not even pissed off, it's just so unbearably dull.
Hop, there it goes. Hop, there it goes. Hop.
Voice acting isn't something that really irks me in a lot of games. You know, if it's good, then it's good. If it's okay, well, it is what it is, and if it's awful, then it's a bit of a problem. The journalist's voice acting is not fucking good. Actually, her whole character, as shallow as it may be, is not good. She doesn't belong here. For a game that sells itself as a dark retro FPS, I can hardly ever take it seriously when the journalist will say something so dumb and out of left field that it'll completely take me out of Fmf's attempt at a horror experience.
Do you know about war safety?
What the fuck is war safety? Is that even a thing? I know a part of the problem is that given that the game studio is foreign, there's bound to be some mistranslations in the dialogue, and I get that. But when you're trying to make a game that is supposed to be taken somewhat seriously with its dark atmosphere and grittiness, I feel like you really need to pay extra attention on your grammar, spelling, sentence structure, and all that jazz. Because if one of those things are off, then the entire vibe is ruined. But still, the journalist is just way too chipper to be in a game where you're blasting eldritch horrors and coming face to face with fucking Cthulhu himself. Truth be told, I don't think any more fibers of my being can tolerate another word from her, so I think it's about time we switch to the priest. I didn't forget about the story. I'm only bringing it up now because it doesn't change between the two characters. The entire story revolves around this cousin Lewis character, who you're supposed to meet up with in his hometown Pestisville, only to find out it's completely empty with the only inhabitants being some ugly monsters. You then later find out that your cousin was killed by them, and the plot becomes a revenge mission where you go and try to take down the source of evil. The cutscenes are narrated by some dude who does a pretty good job. Yet again though, the only problem is that the dialogue is poorly translated. However, I'm not going to dwell on this any more than I already have. Scattered around every level, you can also find some additional pieces of lore, which I've honestly slept on a lot. The way this is done doesn't make it very interesting, and a lot of the time you find a small trinket that is completely meaningless because the game doesn't really provide you with enough of a reason to care. But going back to the priest, he is a much better character. Like, he actually fits very well with this game's tone. He's not constantly spewing out inappropriate one-liners, and he's not really much of a badass either. This dude sounds like any bit of joy and compassion has just been drained out of him, and the only thing he has left are some guns and the power of Christ to get him through a Lovecraftian apocalypse. I like it. It's a nice departure from the smooth-talking gritty badasses this genre has seen so much of. His voice actor still isn't the best, but since the priest isn't such a jarring contrast from this game's tone, I can actually handle playing as him. And in terms of gameplay, he completely curb stomps the journalist. In fact, I'd go as far as to say she doesn't even really need to be in the game. I found myself utilizing much more of the priest's kit because, well, his abilities are actually so much more useful. He has a cross, which unlike the sword, it gives you a short health regen boost without having to do anything else. There's the Necronomicon, which gives you brief immortality, the medallion, which gives you infinite ammo for a short amount of time, and Holy Water, which is just a camera reskin. Everything is leagues better than anything the Journalist has. Some of you might think that the Journalist requires more skill, and while it does seem like that, her whole kit is rather straightforward, and it's kind of similar to the Priest's, except it's just tweaked a little to fit that more aggressive playstyle. I really didn't find myself ever struggling as her. Seriously, I failed to see an actual reason for choosing her. Even if her kit is well put together, she's undeniably much weaker compared to the Priest. Most of her skills can't be utilized during boss fights, and while you can get a decent reward for going through her intended playstyle, you're also actively putting your own health on the line just to get a small fraction of it back. Her Ganja sword pales in comparison to the Priest's instant heal, not to mention him having brief immortality and infinite ammo. While I was having a little bit more fun as the Priest, about as much as you can get out of a retro shooter that has pretty mediocre combat, I noticed something else was clawing at me like a stupid fat cat begging for more food, and that's the level design. It's either painfully inoffensive with levels that don't do anything to surprise you and are what you'd come to expect out of a game like this, or the level design is questionably bad. Some of them are just so linear and mundane that I wish I could talk more about them, but what can I say for a level that only lasts for 3 minutes? Like, it might as well be a cutscene at that point. Do you like bumbling around like a complete idiot in utter darkness with nothing but a shitty lantern or flashlight? Do you also like having to fight enemies in utter darkness while constantly swapping out your light for a gun to shoot at the ugly fucker right in front of you? If you said yes to both of these, good, because this game has way too many of these sections. Hopefully you're just about as enthusiastic for the platforming parts this game has. I don't mind platformers. I don't mind it when a shooter throws in some platforming elements, so long as it's actually built for that. You remember when I talked about this game's strict controls? Yeah, this is when they're a huge problem. This game has some of the most insane platforming sections that completely disregard how the controls actually feel. I don't understand how the devs expect you to jump this. Mind you, it's not impossible, but it seems as if the devs are under the impression that you can jump like 10 feet into the fucking sky. You have to time your jump pretty much the millisecond before you fall off. You know, maybe it wouldn't be so bad if the game sort of prepared you for this beforehand, like let you get used to the controls for situations like this, but for the most part, these sections are almost exclusive to the last chapter. This isn't even the worst. There's one more in particular that really baffles me to no end that comes right before this. You have to jump around on these floating pillars in the small pocket universe. Pretty simple, right? Well, there's also invisible platforms. You have no idea when they start and when they end, making this basically an overglorified leap of faith. You can only hope that you're walking on the right platform because there's not even an indicator that fucking tells you if it's going to lead you into the bottomless black abyss below you. Who actually thought this was a good idea? Who sat down and said, I think it'd be great if we had a random platforming section that violates the very basics of level design. I will perform dental work on you, using nothing but rusty silverware. All in all, I gotta put Forgive Me Father in C tier. It's not a bad game, and it's certainly playable, but I can never wipe the feeling of just wanting so much more out of it. I genuinely want the combat to be as fun as it is in Doom or Blood or like any other fucking retro shooter, but it just isn't. It's a sluggish chore with all the bullet sponge enemies that make short work out of practically any weapon in your arsenal. The concept of having two characters in a skill tree is fun for this genre, but the way both of these are done just don't work very well. One character plays way too well while the other is practically obsolete in comparison, and the skill tree, as promising as it may seem, isn't very jaw-dropping. It's not surprising that Bite Barrel didn't exactly strike gold with Forgive Me Father, considering that it's their first retro shooter. So with that, I do hope that if they decide to tackle any more FPS projects, that they do learn from Fmf'S mistakes. Like I said, there's potential here, but it's super rough around the edges.